this is Untitled Export, and today we are testing which GPU is best for ultra-wide gaming, the 5700 XT or its arch rival, the 2070 Super. We will be testing at both 3440 by 1440 and 2560 by 1080. Representing the 5700 XT is the Aorus model, and representing the 2070 Super is the Gigabyte Gaming OC model. The test system is an R5 3600 with 16GB of 3733 MHz CL15 memory, and for more specs you can look down in the description. Now, starting off with Battlefield 5 at 1080p, the 5700 XT has the highest average FPS at 129.1 versus 114.1 frames per second for the 2070 Super. However, the frame times are miles better on the 2070 Super here. If we move to 1440p, the 2070 Super now takes the lead ever so slightly at 80.8 frames per second versus 79.1 frames per second for the 5700 XT. I also tested with ray tracing on 1440p, and as you can see, there is quite a large performance penalty. Now, next up is Call of Duty Modern Warfare at 1080p. The 5700 XT is edging out the 2070 Super, with the 5700 XT coming in at 107.7 frames per second and the 2070 Super coming in at 106.1 frames per second. There really isn't much in it, but the 0.1% low was quite bad on the 2070 Super, and this happened during every single benchmark run. But as we can see, at 1440p the problem went away, so I wouldn't read too much into it. At 1440p, the average FPS is identical between the two cards, and there is only in the frame times where the 2070 Super takes a tiny lead. And again, with ray tracing on, the performance takes quite a large hit. Next up is Control, and we are using DX12 in this title. The 5700 XT takes a surprisingly large lead at 1080p at 14% over the 2070 Super. Moving to 1440p, the 5700 XT retains its lead, but it's slightly smaller now at 13%. And with the RTX on or ray tracing on, it is virtually unplayable at 1440p. Next up is The Division 2. Here the 2070 Super takes a 10% lead over the 5700 XT at 1080p. And if we move to 1440p, the 2070 Super's lead increases to 12% over the 5700 XT. Onto Forza Horizon 4, and at 1080p, the 5700 XT and the 2070 Super has almost identical average FPS, but the 5700 XT does have better frame times in this case, although you probably wouldn't notice the difference. In 1440p, the 2070 Super takes a 3% lead over the 5700 XT, but again, here you'd be hard-pressed to notice the difference. Next up is Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And at 1080p, the 2070 Super has a very tiny lead in the average FPS. However, the game was much smoother, as is evident by the frame times. It is much the same story at 1440p, although now the 2070 Super also has a 20% lead in the average FPS as well. And the frame times on this 5700 XT is very, very poor. I did expect better performance from an AMD sponsored game. Now it's time for Rainbow Six Siege. At 1080p, the 2070 Super is 2% ahead of the 5700 XT, and moving to 1440p, that lead increases to 8%. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is next, and here the 2070 Super is 8% ahead at 1080p. At 1440p, it is 10% ahead of the 5700 XT. Last up is The Witcher 3. At 1080p, the 2070 Super is 12% ahead of the 5700 XT. And the frame times here are probably caused by the CPU and not the GPU, seeing as they don't change much when moving to 1440p. But at 1440p, the 2070 Super is still 11% ahead of the 5700 XT. So then, let's look at the relative performance between all these games. At 1080p, the 2070 Super was on average a single percent faster. At 1440p, that does increase to a 6% average lead for the 2070 Super, and that's pretty much as expected, really, because the performance difference between the two cards does go up with the resolution. So the higher resolution you have, the faster the 2070 Super will be over the 5700 XT. So the 2070 Super is more efficient at these higher resolutions than the 5700 XT for some reason. Could be drivers, could be something else, I don't know. But that's pretty much all I have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching, and farewell.